Would you believe me if I said this flag isn't actually the most compelling argument as to why Gwen might be trans? With the history in cinematography and writing, I decided to do a deep dive, and what I found was shocking. By the end of this video, you'll know one of two things. Either Gwen is one of media's best examples of representation, or this story as a whole is one of the best allegories. Let's start from the beginning. We're introduced to a pink, white, and blue title card for Gwen's location, before seeing her under a teal spotlight in front of a soft pink wall. In her words, she's beating her feelings with sticks, maintaining a secret. We, the audience, know this has to do with Miles Morales. However, in an allegory or even representation, the analogies don't need to directly correlate to being transgender. Not only is this a valid approach to representation, but it can actually be better, and later in the video we'll talk about it more, and I think you'll agree with me then. Now, right out the gate, she has a secret that she keeps from both her father and her friends. This is a theme that will be explored throughout the entire movie. In the first few minutes, we see Spider-Woman, Gwen's secret identity, is portrayed as a criminal by both the media and her very own father. The isolation of keeping this truth to herself becomes more and more important, as now she fears she may lose her father and even be penalized if she were to ever tell the truth. Worse yet, while the media spins a misinterpreted lie, Gwen struggles with the fact that it's not true, that it's not her fault, and she's doing the best with what she's been given. In this story, it's assumed that Spider-Woman had unalived Peter Parker, so when her father perpetuates this idea, it could be seen as a direct analogy to the way parents feel the grief of their perceived child when their child comes out.
But they didn't really know me.
When she gets home from her band meetup, her father speaks about Spider-Woman. The tension we, the audience, feel, knowing that Gwen's in fact the supposed criminal her father pursues, is indicative of how it feels to be closeted in a transphobic household. She agrees with her dad's rhetoric in an attempt to escape the conversation, all the while being visibly hurt by his words. And not long after that, bam! The image you likely knew I was going to mention. The proverbial ribbon on the entire package that was the allegory up until now. It was just out of image for the entire conversation between her and her father regarding Spider-Woman. And that's not the only trans flag. Her father has a pin on his jacket, which is exactly what a supportive father would do in the scenario that his daughter is trans. I want to talk to you about something that may seem irrelevant, but it is very much not. You may or may not know I have a history of shooting films. In that, I learned the rule of thirds. It's a technique that allows directors to draw focus towards objects or people and to balance any given image of a film. In this scene, the Protect Trans Kids flag is less of a background prop and in fact a secondary focus. Positioned here, not too bright, not too dark, and even the utilization of leading lines draw focus here, right after here. So much so that if this film were to be cropped for a standard home television, it would still be in frame. And you've likely heard this term before, showing and not telling. In other words, what you can show the audience versus tell them usually benefits the narrative and the meaning behind what you're showing. In this scenario, she is so accepted as who she is that being trans isn't even a point of discussion. And I am not saying that representation when done bold and loud is a bad thing. What I am saying is, as a writing device, subtlety is key. It's techniques like this that allow for messages and meaning to be conveyed without shoving it into people's faces, which is the perfect balance when it comes to representation. Subtle, yet present. Immediately after, Gwen does her Spider-Woman thing for a bit, and this line drops from Gwen.
You call this art?
We're talking about it, aren't we?
Art is supposed to provoke discussion, and that's why ambiguity and subtlety in films are so important. My point is this: people who refute the possibility of her being trans don't understand the intention of the writers nor the character. It's supposed to be ambiguous, so that way you can decide for yourself and perhaps discuss these nuances with others. If she is trans and the writers chose to reveal this at face value, any conversation would lose its weight. Some people would be happy, other people would be mad. There would be no room for discussion or interpretation. But we are not done with the evidence of her being trans or the allegories, so let us continue. When Jessica Drew rolls in and does some badass motorbike stuff, the first question from Gwen is referring to Jessica's very pregnant belly. She reveals the fact that she doesn't know whether or not the baby will be a boy or a girl because her husband wants to be surprised. And of course, Jessica's like the coolest chick ever, so Gwen asks this:
Will you adopt me?
What? Okay, I'll admit this one is a reach, but as someone who is transgender, if I met a badass biker chick who said she wanted to be surprised about the sex of their baby, as in they really didn't care about gender, I would ask the same. And believe it or not, I am a fully grown adult. But the important thing to take away from this is the writers went out of their way to reference the nonchalance of what their baby will be born as. Remember, any line could have been there. And if you ever do learn about writing scripts, you'll learn that every single line should either convey character, meaning, or move the plot forward. Spider-Verse is a masterclass on how to write and animate, so believe me when I say they do not waste a single line in this movie. Not long after that, one of the most heart-wrenching scenes in any Spider-Man movie plays out. Gwen is confronted by her father at gunpoint. She's out of webs and staring down her very own father's barrel. She begins to plead. She tries to reason with the police captain that she's saved lives, but he won't hear it. He persists that she killed Peter Parker, and she was going to prison for it. Her begging persists as her emotions flare up. Then, her father fires a warning shot into the air, and just silence follows after that. Those 5 seconds where both remain motionless feels like an eternity. Gwen cowers as her father lowers his handgun towards her once more. His eye trained on her like she was a vile animal. Her shoulders drop. Her guard loosens, with only one thing left that she can do. She takes off her mask, revealing her identity. This entire time, through every conversation, she was the monster that he was trying to hunt. It's a moment where she quite literally has nowhere else to turn but to come out, which is a very relatable situation for a lot of trans individuals, be it because they were found out beforehand or because their mental health just couldn't let them escape the reality anymore. At this point in the film, focus largely shifts towards Miles Morales, so we're going to skim through a lot of the film until the very end where the last very juicy bits are. In fact, there's a line at the end of this movie that I am literally in love with, so let's just get through this film as soon as we can to get to that. The first very quick point is if anyone were to dismiss Gwen being trans, then that would dismiss this line right here.
In every other universe, Gwen Stacy falls for Spider-Man.
Because there's infinite universes in this multiverse, there is really no comic book you can reference to say she is or isn't trans, so you kind of have to go with what the movie gave you. Another very quick point before we get to the juicy bits at the end is later in the movie, Gwen had to hide a secret from Miles Morales, and it was because she didn't know how to tell him in her own words. It's a very relatable situation when you join the dating scene as trans. But these are ultimately more side notes. Let's finish Gwen's story and ultimately this video. At the end of the film, we're back where we started. Gwen goes home, ready to be berated and possibly imprisoned by her father. The weight of her revealing who she was still lingers thick in the air. While wearing her costume, she goes to her room to grab some objects when her father opens the door. The colors are muted, stale, and dark. She goes to leave, but this time he pleads. Gwen turns around and through her suit's expression, you can see a pained anger. The feeling of betrayal has turned from sorrow into distrust and frustration. The tension between them hasn't subsided, but Gwen decides to confront it until this line, this beautiful summary of her experience, and maybe your experience, is dropped. I can do all these things, but I can't help the people I love the most, and they can only know half of who I am, so I'm completely on my own. And now I don't even know what the right thing is anymore. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, but I know I can't lose one more friend. Soon after that, Gwen extends her wrists, telling her father to bring her in. She can't change who she is. She can't change what has happened beyond her control. To her, in this moment, the most and only important thing is her father's love and acceptance, even more so than her own freedom and image. But in this moment, her father does the very thing she had thought only impossible. He accepts her, believes her. He doesn't fully understand, but regardless, he decides in that moment to quit the police force. They hug, and in possibly the most apparent moment of symbolism via color, the entire room erupts into a beautiful light blue, pink, and white. That makes both times where there was conflict within the household due to her identity, where it ends with either a trans flag or trans colors. Gwen's entire story is a direct reflection of the isolation and fear that many of us have gone through for a good portion, if not all of our lives. The pain of being perceived as inherently wrong for who she is, the fear of people's inability to understand that in broad terms it isn't her fault, and not knowing how to tell the truth if only she had the courage. But the inevitability is those truths found a way to the surface despite her trying to stop them. What matters is this story is clearly an allegory for our experience. Many small decisions from the writers that allude to this could have been replaced with literally anything else. Gwen's character arc, journey, the choice in colors, all of this ultimately correlates to transgender expression and struggles. I mean, even the primary color formation of her uniform is pink, blue, and white. I think in this story, Gwen is trans. I believe it was an intentional choice to write her story around this while elegantly placing hints within enough to allude to it. And with that, in my opinion, as far as representation goes, this is a masterclass. Do the writers need to come out and verify whether or not a character is trans? It depends. One benefit is she is so accepted by her family and her friends for being trans that it isn't even a point of discussion. On the other hand, in the current social climate, this approach makes the most sense. The minority represented feels seen while not having done so through a one-sided character or a stereotype. And to those that don't think she's trans, they see an endearing individual who just so happens to be an ally. It's a win-win, and it humanizes the community altogether. If you want to support my channel, please like, subscribe, comment. All of that really does go a long way with the algorithm stuff, and it actually helps the channel a lot. But if you're a caffeine fiend like me and you want to support just a little bit more, consider this video sponsored. G-Subs, I drink it literally all the time. I replaced energy drinks and coffee with it. It's just so good. Just use a code genderfluid or the link down below, and thanks so much for watching. Okay.